Hi there, my name is Jacob Baldry. You're watching part 6 of Motogadget's multi-part series covering the installation of the Motogadget mo.unit Blue and many of its accessories. In the previous parts, we've helped you with your shopping list. We've helped you understand your own motorcycle's wiring harness. We've shown you the skills and tools needed. We've helped you integrate the mo.unit into your bike's charging and ignition system, and we've installed the mo.switches, both basic and the LED versions. In this video, in part 6, we are showing you the wiring and installation of the mo.blaze disc with and without a mirror, the mo.blaze pin, the mo.blaze 10s, and the mo.rear. This should really cover any style of Motogadget turn signal or brake light that you're going to be using, but keep in mind I wouldn't actually do one of each in all the corners. I'd maybe choose a set of mo.blaze discs for up front and the mo.rear only out back, or 4 mo.blaze pins and a separate brake light, something like that. But I've got 4 or 5 different spots, so I might as well show you 4 or 5 different things. By the end of this video, we will have something installed into all the output spots of the mo.unit Blue, except for the aux2, just because it's for something auxiliary, and I don't have something auxiliary to stick into it. I could do a Cayo mo.dokk from Motogadget if I wanted my cell phone up here. I could do heated grips. I could do more auxiliary lighting, something like that, but we're gonna skip over that for now. When we come back after I've rebuilt this motorcycle and I'm actually installing all the Motogadget parts that I want on this specific bike, maybe something will go into aux2, but for now we're gonna skip that one over. It shouldn't change a thing. You'll certainly know what you can do with aux2 by the time you finish this first series. Now, before we get too far, let me show you what I've changed or what I've updated since last time I saw you in part 5 to kind of be ready for this part. So first, I've gone with the black handlebars and I've switched out the mo.switch basic on this side for the mo.switch LED. So these are the ones that I'm actually going to run on the final build, this side and this side, but we are all full mo.switch LED. So these ones are the pre-wired ones. So we're no longer mismatched with 2 different, mo.switch systems. We're going to be on LED pre-wired going forward now, but I'll still be talking about the mo.switch basics and how that adjusts for how you're going to be wiring in some of the lighting we're talking about in this video. Now, I think the only other thing besides just cleaning up the wires a little bit was I installed the brake switch, just roughly, but enough so that we can see our brake light, because in this video, we're going to be installing a couple brake lights. To do that, for this Brembo brake, it comes with these 2 bullet connectors and this wire here, and you can see that there's really no polarity, and just as long as I touch these 2 wires together, if I pop them into the bullet connectors and I press the brake lever, the circuit is connected. So this will act just like a ground controlled switch. So we've got one of these that will go to ground and one that goes to the mo.unit on the input side for the brake light. For final installation, you will also be splicing in your rear brake as well if you have a brake on your foot, so that you can wire that in and that'll press the same button. But for now, we just have a front brake up here. There's not even brake lines running to it, but just to have that input selected and so we can see our brake light turn on, we've got it connected here. Now, because it is so important to your safety, we're gonna cover wire thicknesses one more time before we get into this. We covered it a little bit in part 4 when we started installing some wires into the output side, but now that we're really getting into the output side of things, installing all these different devices with different current draws and all this stuff, we're gonna cover it again, and I'm going to give you some really good common sense tips to help you pick the right wire thicknesses. So with that, here are a few ways to figure out what wire thickness you should use for each of your accessories, like this Motogadget mo.blaze disc. Now, to clear up any misconceptions about how wire thickness affects your electrical system, let's make a simple analogy. Current is pulled by the device, like this turn signal here. It is not pushed into it. It requests it and it pulls it from the mo.unit or from the power source. Think of the wires like a straw and the power sitting in the mo.unit or in the battery as a milkshake. A thicker straw just makes it easier for you to extract the amount of milkshake you want. It doesn't shove more milkshake into your mouth, right? That's the same here. A thicker wire lets the device pull the amount of current it wants easier. It doesn't shove any more in. So there's really no issue with going to thicker wire. There are ways to overload a device, but thicker wires is not one of them. Now, you can overstress your wires if they're too thin. Think of running a really thin straw in your milkshake, and now it's maybe collapsing in on itself because you have to have so much pressure for the milkshake to go through, right? It's the same here, sort of, where if you have really thin wires, it attempts to pull that current through and it can fail. It can cause overheating, then melting, then sudden voltage drop, maybe it fails completely, it could start a fire, it's a bad thing. The mo.unit's outputs are electronically protected, but still we have to pick the right wire thicknesses. Okay, as we've covered before, if you want to just play it safe, you can use the Motogadget mo.unit manual and use the max wire thicknesses that they suggest for the mo.unit. If you run those wires out of the mo.unit, there's a very, very good chance that the device you have at the end of it will be able to handle it just fine. Those wire thicknesses listed in the manual are the thickness of wire you will need if your device that you're plugging into your mo.unit is pulling the maximum amount of power that the mo.unit can give out. This LED turn signal is not pulling that maximum power. That's why you can see it's actually very thin wires on the end of it, and this will be just fine. And that actually leads me to the next way you can figure out how thick of wires you need, which is if your device has wires connected to it, it's a really good sign that that is the thickness of wires you need. It's not a perfect science. Someone maybe could have messed up when manufacturing the product if it's not Motogadget, but for the most part, it's a really good, way to investigate how thick of wires you need. If there's already wires plugged into it, like hardwired into it, that's probably the thickness that you'll be okay with. The last way to figure out the wire thicknesses you need will also be the smartest way to do this, and that is through Ohm's law. We covered it in part 4. I think I explained it well, so I'm going to show the clip again to you here. An Ohm's law is a way for you to be able to end up at a chart to show you the wire thicknesses that you can use. Here's how it works. You take the wattage of the end device, so let's say like a headlight, and let's say it's 24 watts for simple math for myself, divided by the volts, and that's going to be a 12-volt system, so we're going to divide it by 12. And that's going to get us the amp draw, which would be 2 amps. 24 divided by 12 is 2. So now that we know the amp draw required, we're going to measure the length of wire that we need, and we're going to take those two numbers and we can go to a wire thickness chart and we can figure out the thickness of wire that we can use. I would always play it safe here and go a little thicker than you need. There are many of these charts that you can find online. I would just say always err on the side of thicker wire than thinner. And again, if you don't want to do this math, just run the thickness of wires that the mo.unit manual says. As a warm-up and to help you get your head around what we're doing here, we're going to install the horn and the headlight first. They're not Motogadget products, but they're really quite simple and they'll just help us understand what we're doing. So we have the horn here and it has 2 spade terminals on the back. These are, there's no polarity to this horn. There rarely is in a motorcycle horn, but check your own. But we're going to hook up 2 wires to this. So I've already pre-cut these wires to a pretty rough length. Again, this isn't a final installation, but on one end we have the 2 spade terminals, these are the female side, and then we have the 2 wire ferrules that will go into the mo.unit and to the ground terminal. First, we're going to ground the horn. Nice. And we're going to plug the black here, we're going to use as ground, into this ground terminal right there. There we go. And then on the horn, I'm just going to pick a side and plug that in like that. So now the horn is grounded. Keep in mind that this black wire here, it could have gone to any good frame ground. We've covered grounds a ton at this point, but just know that this is a ground wire. You're good there. Now for the power wire, I've chosen white because the horn button on the input side is white. So white in, white out makes sense to me. We'll take the spade terminal side, plug that on there, and now we can take the wire ferrule and plug it into the spot that says horn in the outputs. And that is going to be 3 more in after the starter. Okay, and we've got that one installed there. So now I'm going to install my fuse. You never really want to be plugging in stuff while hot, so I always pull my fuse out, but we're going to put our fuse in, pop that in. I'm sure you saw some lights. We're going to turn it on with our Mo.lock NFC. And now up here, you can see the lights have turned on. Great, and we have this white button, and that is what I've designated for the horn. This is the one time I'm gonna press this button, so enjoy it. Yep, there it is. Easy as that. The horn is installed. I'll probably just slap it up front here near the engine on the frame and get it out of the way. For our headlight, we have a couple options on what we can do. This is the 7-inch sealed beam style. It isn't a sealed beam. I actually can pull this light bulb out, but the connector is the same. This is the really, really common one on a lot of these old motorcycles. It's like 5 3/4 inch or 7-inch. I think this is the 7-inch here. Yep. And we have these 3 prongs and a connector that needs to connect into them. I'm gonna set this aside, but you know what this looks like, the 3 prongs. Now on our old wiring harness, the one that we ripped out in part 2, I think, we have the connector that goes into the headlight somewhere. I marked it with tape. There we go, headlight. So what you can do, say goodbye to this harness, still hold on to, this is why we didn't throw anything away, just so you never know what you might need to use. We have the connector right here. So this 3-prong connector is going to be able to connect into the back of the headlight. If you don't want to use your old one, you can go ahead and buy one online. I'm sure they sell these connectors online and maybe some like extra wire already attached to it. Wouldn't that be cool? But we can really easily just use this old one. We have 2 options on how to extend the wires in this. One option I like more than the other. One is to pop off this sleeving. There we go. And we have a ton of wires here. I'm not sure why. We'll have to figure out. I don't think that needs to be a part of anything. And I think this brown is an extra ground. I'm not sure, but we're really simplifying this from whatever version this was before. It probably had something to do with the diode and starter, but really we only need 3 wires coming out the ends here, at least for the mo unit setup. So we've got this connector. We could take the 3 wires that we need and we could crimp on extra wire that's the correct thickness, or we could solder it on if it's not going to be near a flex point or a heat point. The last thing you could do, which is what we're going to do here, so long as this works out with all these weird connectors in here, is pull all of these metal prongs all the way out so we have just a piece of plastic, and we're gonna run some new clips into the back of this so it looks nice and clean. Part 3 will show you kind of how to be connecting some of those spots, but let's go over to the bench. I'll show you how to do it really quick. Okay, so let's check this out. I may not actually have the connectors that I want for this, but let's see here if I can pry these out without breaking anything. Okay, there's one out. What does this look like? Let's see. You know what the problem is? I think my spade connectors are too narrow. Yep, they're too narrow. If I had the right spade connector type, that would have worked, but not this time. For today, we're just gonna solder this up to extend some wires. But on the final install, we'll do something a little cleaner. I'll grab those metal spade connectors to swap them in. It looks like yellow was low beam and my mo.switch has green as the headlight. So I'm going to use green here. And I'll run the high beam as blue. Again, pick whatever colors make sense for your wiring diagram. I might even change these on the final build. From here, we're going to add the wire ferrules as we always have. Okay, we've got our makeshift wiring harness that will work for now at least. And we're going to, again, no fuse in this. We don't want to plug things in hot. We're going to plug our ground wire in. That's black. We'll see if I did this in the right order. Thankfully, this is protected if I've messed something up. Green is going to be in the regular headlight spot. Light, green, and then blue is what I've chosen for high beam, and that is just right next to it. Right there. Okay, let's plug in our headlight and we'll grab our fuse, pop that in, turn it on. Now let's see if we can get our headlight to work. Hey, okay. Yeah, that works great. We hooked it up correctly. This here is the mo.blaze disc. This is the mo.blaze disc dark, actually, and this is a great turn signal that can go on the end of your handlebars. Now, to install this, we need to know a couple things. First off is the orientation in which we put this. You'll see that it's marked on here and it says R. That is for the right side. So these are directional. You need to get a left and a right one. Don't just order two pairs blindly or a pair blindly. And what you're gonna do is if you have a little cap on the end of your handlebars, you're going to want to pry that off. So I have a flathead screwdriver right here, and we'll just carefully get underneath it and pop that off. If you have grips that have a closed end, you're going to want to cut that open somehow. But if you run the mo.grips from Motogadget, they come open-ended so that you can run these really easily. So you'll notice with the mo.blaze discs, they come with quite a few little washers and rubber pieces. Here's how we're going to install it, then I'll show you how to wire it, and then we'll do it all together. So you have a few different sizes of these rubber pieces. These are going to slide on to the threaded portion of your mo.blaze disc. And what we'll do is we'll tighten it to squeeze it and expand it and fill in the handlebar. So if you have one that's too big, it's not going to fit in the first place. If you use one too small, it's not going to expand enough by the time you tighten it down. But if you have one that just barely fits in there, that's really what you want. So one of these will work for you on your standard handlebar sizes. It's just up to you to figure out which one it is. For me, it's the middle-sized one. And we'll slide this washer and this rubber piece, probably one at a time, over these wires. There we go. Then the rubber piece. And then the nut. So you'll see, because we have to thread these wires through all this stuff, that if we are choosing to use a connector on the end of this, we probably want to install all of this stuff first. Because if we add a connector first, it may not be able to fit over all of these pieces here. So you can see if I just go ahead and install this, there's a lot of room, and what we want to do is tighten it. I think I can do it by hand. Just enough that it only barely fits in there. A little more. Nope, I'm going to use my adjustable wrench. Let's see, and we can see it's getting bigger. There we go. So it's just barely fitting in there. That's what we want, because now we're going to hand tighten it the rest of the way. We want the Motogadget logo, that's right here. We want that to be facing up. And once we get it in here, we really don't want to twist this more than 4 times. Really, if you've got a kind of squeaky fit from the beginning, you probably will only need maybe 1 whole turn. And what we want to make sure of on this throttle side is that we have room at the end for this. We don't want to jam it on here and have it all slide together and get your grip sticky. So we'll just give a little space right there. See, you can hear it's not grabbing yet. So I need to add a little bit more friction like that. There we go, that should do it. See how you don't hear it squeaking? That's us turning that threaded spot, the bolt is holding in place, and it is getting tighter. That alone, I think that was only half a turn, is really strong in there. I'll see if I can't even get a second turn in, and I don't want to break it. That is more than enough right there. That is how it'll install. This is how it'll look when you're done, but let's actually wire it up. To take it off, we just loosen it until it's loose enough to pull out. And now we can add some connectors. So in terms of wiring everything, how you choose to wire in all your accessories and run them to the Mo unit comes down to your creativity, your own personal sense of organization, and how important serviceability is to you. There is nothing wrong if you had these wires coming off of the mo.blaze disc, which were super long initially. I cut them short. If you wanted to run them all the way down to the mo unit into the right spot and the nice ground somewhere nearby. That is fine. You don't need to add connectors or splices or anything crazy. That is totally fine. You just may find that once you sleeve everything, it gets a little bit harder to like pull just this out because it's all hidden in all that sleeving that you have. So it is up to you. What we are going to do for this version today is I'm going to just run 2 wires. I have a ground wire here, and I've already pushed it up through the handlebar, and I think it should be right here. There we go. And I'm going to run a green wire because that's the color of my turn right. I'm gonna run that through, and we're gonna add a little Meizu P25 connector right here. We'll click it together, and we'll pull everything back in. Remember that you can be smart about grounds as well. If I wanted to have this ground that came out of the set of handlebars, add another wire here and run it to the left side for the mo.blaze disc over there, that would work too. And then you'd only have 1 wire coming out this spot here. If you have the mo.switch basics that aren't pre-wired, you could pull off the switches and you could run this ground wire only, 6 inches over and connect it to the eyelet that's hiding under this, and then you'd be able to have your ground there. All that matters is that the ground wire successfully gets grounded to a nice, strong, low resistance ground, and the positive wire ends up at the output side of your mo unit. What happens between your accessory and the mo unit is really up to you. Okay, we've got our 2 wires placed. Now, I will mention again, really find some thinner ground wire. This is way too thick. It is making these Meizu P25 connectors even harder than they already are, which they are a very difficult connection to do, even with solid dexterity, but we've got them connected to both the turn signal here and to inside the handlebars. So we will go ahead and connect them together, just like that. Now, you've seen that a lot of times I've been pushing wires in and pulling them out to like drive all this wiring in. We actually don't want to do that here because when we do that, let's say we push all this wire in and we pull it so it's got only a certain amount of slack and this connector is sitting, in the middle of the throttle tube. When we sleeve everything up, it's kind of locking that slack in place, if you will. So all the serviceability that you've added with this clip here won't exist anymore if you can't get to this clip. So we actually don't want to pull this tight and shove everything in. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and, where's my wire? And try to drag all this in, because if it's so far in, I can't get to that clip again, and we might as well have not used the Meizu P25 connector. So let's make sure we keep enough slack that if in 5 years I want to come back to this and do something different, swap from a mo.blaze disc dark to a standard mo.blaze disc or something, or I crash and I need to replace this, I can still get to this connector. So we are not going to pull from the far side, from the center of the handlebars to take up all that slack. Instead, we're just gonna try to really nicely push this in without, having the slack end up outside of the handlebars. So we're just gonna kind of watch this and see what it wants to do, but I think it really will just push in once it makes a turn. Again, thinner wires here would certainly help. No reason for me to use those thick wires. There we go. Okay, just using my finger. And if I wanted, I can just pull it right back out. See, there it is. So that's what we might be doing once my hair goes gray and we want to replace this turn signal. I'll thank the younger Jacob then. And now we're gonna add a little left-handed twist since we're gonna be tightening it to the right. So we might as well twist it in the opposite direction at first. That way, once we get a couple twists in, it'll be just fine. And now we're pushed in here. And do I have enough? Nope. See, I'm gonna take it out because I don't want to just keep spinning because I've got wires in there. Let's unspin it a little. And tighten that up. Okay, that should do it. If I can even get it in here, let's see. Ooh, too much. Give it a slight twist to loosen it. Well, now is it good? Well, now it's good. Okay. Give it a little gap like I want, and I think, there it goes. Okay, there we are. No throttle interference. We're installed, we're wired in. Let's run these wires here now to the mo unit. Okay, let's check it out. We got the mo unit fuse in. We've got the unit on. Now let's use our right turn signal. There it is. And besides just having the Motogadget logo facing straight at 12 o'clock, I can also just put my hand out and see that there's a main source of light. And I just want to make sure that that's not, pointing up here into the sky or pointing, down into the ground. We just want that to be straightforward and maybe just a slight bias downward, just to be nice to your neighbor and the drivers in front of you. But look at that, that is stunning. All right, let's go do the other side and do it with a mirror. It's a completely different install than this. We're not using the rubber pieces, the washers, anything like that. So it's gonna be a whole different style setup. Let me show you. Now, if you want to add the mo.blaze disc onto the end of your handlebars, but you want a mirror to be on there as well, this is what you're going to need. This is a bar end adapter, but it's made to run both the mo.blaze disc and a mirror. They have a bar end adapter for just the mirror, and it looks like this, and has a little cap that goes on the end of it, but we are not going to be using that. We're going to be using this style because we want a mo.blaze disc to go on the end of it. This piece here would normally slide over the top of this when this wasn't expanded before I used it for the first time. And that is if you have a larger internal diameter set of handlebars. We don't. We're going to use this set, so that goes off to the side. Now, all of this stuff that we used previously for the first installation without a mirror, we are not going to use any of it. That is not how the mo.blaze holds on to the handlebars anymore. What is going to happen is this piece here with this screw with a hole running through it and this nut, they are going to come together into this, and we're going to fasten this into the handlebars. Then we will install our mirror first before the mo.blaze. Then we will install the mo.blaze disc into this here. So in the end, it will look something like this. Now, keep in mind that because we have to install this screw with a very tiny hole in it, first that goes on this side, and then this piece here, then this piece here actually goes on this side here. But because we have to first install this into the handlebars, we really can't use a connector here. I cut these short because I've been using these for 100 different examples and experiments, but we need to keep these wires long because I can't add a connector later, because once I put it into the handlebars, these wires are gone, they're in the handlebars, that's just where they are. They have to come out the set of handlebars somewhere. So maybe you can run a connector outside the handlebars in the center, where all the wires have been exiting, but you can't just run one right here. That serviceability is just going to be a little bit different than if you didn't have a mirror. So in short, if you want a mirror, you need a specific adapter that Motogadget sells, and you need to keep your wires long on your mo.blaze disc. It's a little bit of a puzzle, but it'll be fun. Let me show you how to do it. So if you were to make any mistakes installing the mo.blaze pin in the mirror and that whole setup, it's going to be because of the order of operations. You really just need to make sure you do everything in the right order. There's no it's not going to be detrimental. You might just have to you might wire something in and then realize you got to pull it back out because you forgot to add the mirror or something like that. So it's not the end of the world, but really you want to do it in this order and not in any other. We are going to start, same as before, popping off this cap. I'm seeing less and less handlebars come with these. I actually sometimes look for them and can't find them, so I'm keeping those. But we have an open end to the handlebar there. And now we are going to install this big metal piece here, this bar end adapter. We're going to take the Allen key fitted screw, drop it down there, and we will take the nut. Essentially there's a cone-like aspect of it, and that will face into it. And you know what? I'm going to need to take my Allen key and grab hold of it like that. And now I can screw this on. And this will feel similar to before, because what we're going to do is line this all up, tighten this down until, man, I can't hold on to this Allen key, until it starts tightening. And we are going to try to get a fit here where it just barely fits in, is a little snug. And what's nice here is you can see it's not going to interfere with the switches, so I'm not worried about that. There we go, loose back. That's right there, that's just about as big as I can make it while it still fits. And this one we don't need any spacing here because it's not a throttle, so we can just run that right up to the grip, and we're going to tighten that down. So we've got that installed. Now, before we do anything else, let's get the mirror on, and I'm just going to loosely tighten it. As I said, there is the screw that is now in here, a part of this adapter that has a very tiny hole in it. I do not think I would ever be able to take these two wires, as loose and as thin as they are, and somehow run them in here to go through that pinhole. So I am going to run this thick wire that I checked before to make sure it still will fit through the Allen key, and I'm going to straighten that out the best I can. And this is going to be kind of my chase wire. I'm going to run this all the way through out to the center and then tie off those wires to the end and pull it all through. You can also see I found the spare wire. Let's see here. Honestly, I'm kind of just poking until I find that Allen key. Oh, okay, there we go. So we're through. Now I got to find it over here. Also, it's never too late to mention that I know I've wired in the mo switches and sleeved them up a little bit. You can do this all at the same time so that you're not wiring everything in, locking it in place, then adding more into the handlebars. If you know you're going to be running these mo.blaze discs with your switches, just wire them up ahead of time with everything else. Okay, wow, that was not easy. Again, make that hole as big as you feel comfortable with, because when you're searching for wires and trying to fish them out, the more wires you have already in that hole, the harder it is to find another one. But we finally got it through. It took me probably about 5 minutes if you want to know the actual time. And we're just going to kind of pull that through, maybe to about there. And now we're going to attach the wires for our mo.blaze disc. This again is not going to be easy, but it's going to be possible. The thinner the chase wire you can run, the better, because then if this is really thin, when I tape stuff to it, it's still gonna fit through. Because this kind of barely fit through, I'm actually going to strip the insulation off of it. Again, we're not using this wire for anything. This is just gonna pull the actual useful wires through. I really just need to make this connection right here where I'm gonna tie in as thin as possible so that it'll fit through. Let's see, what if I just kind of take these three, almost like I'm going to solder them, kind of tie them together here. I could also just solder this right now and just be willing to cut it once it comes through the handlebars, but I'm gonna put a little piece of tape on it. It looks nice, but I don't actually trust it. You wanna add as little thickness as possible, so very little tape here. Okay, let's all cross our fingers and try to run this through. Okay, I see the tape through here. We made it through the handlebars. Okay, we are through. So still gonna leave a little slack here. Don't need to go crazy. Don't want to, no reason to pull all the wire through, but it's definitely mostly through. So now you wonder, how do we install this? How does this stay on here? Well, like I said, it is actually going to be this bolt that holds the mirror that's gonna clamp tightly. So we'll just hold that in place. And then we're gonna tighten this down with the Motogadget logo facing up. And we can play around with this. We can tighten it and see if it's where we want it to be, and then loosen this again. None of this is the problem. We'll start right there. See, I can already feel it's almost locked in. Now it's definitely locked in, but we'll give it just a bit more. Okay, we are locked in place there. Everything is wired up inside the handlebars. We've got the wires coming out over here. Now let's pop them into the mo unit and test it out again. And with the mo unit turned on, left turn signal, There we go. So we have the front end, the front turn signals done. Now, if you're gonna pause the video here and start doing this yourself, I wanna mention one thing we're gonna do in the future that affects what you did up here, which is we will need to splice in or connect the rear turn signals with the front ones as they meet somewhere in the mo unit. You can do that by putting 2 wires into the wire ferrule and then into the mo unit, or you can connect them at any point you'd like. Again, that comes down to creativity, organization, and serviceability that you need out of your wiring system. But just keep that in mind for how you're going to be wiring everything in, even at the front here. But with a click on and a click off, click on, we have the turn signal working, we've got the mirror installed, we can still adjust this how we need to. But from here, let's go to the back end and start installing the mo.blaze pin, the mo.blaze 10s, and the mo.rear. That'll also involve the brake light, so we can see how that's gonna work and wire up. So here we are at the back of the motorcycle, and we are going to install 3 different lighting setups. One is going to be the mo.blaze pin. This is very similar to the mo.blaze disc that was up front. It is just 2 wires, well they're cut here, but there's 2 wires, just positive and negative, and it acts as a turn signal. We're gonna put that here on the right side. On the left side, we're going to put the mo.blaze 10s. Now, what's cool about the 10s is that you can see there are multiple wires, and that is because this is a turn signal. It's also a running light, and believe it or not, it is a brake light. You will need a pair of these to count, I think, for ECE certification, but we're just gonna install one on that side just as an example, but if you run 2 of these, that count as brake lights and turn signals as well. Then in the center, we are going to do the mo.rear. Now this one is great because rear brake lights are really tough to find good ones. I would know, I have looked everywhere for them. So I'm a big fan of any nice, good rear brake light setup. This one has a light at the bottom as well that lights up the license plate, which is great. And it's got the turn signals and the brake lights are built into there as well, just like the 10s. And that mounts up on the back here. So I'm very excited to see this one mounted up as well. Let's start here on this side with the mo.blaze pin. It's really not too complex, especially if you just did the handlebars. This is gonna seem really easy. It is just the mo.blaze pin here and 1 nut. And let's say we have a hole here. It's not big enough. I'm going to have to drill it, but I can show you at least that we're just gonna wire it through this hole and pop it through and then screw on the nut on the opposite side and clamp it down. Now, you can see on this, there is a ledge, and that is where the light comes out and reflects up. So we're going to want to make sure that we have that oriented in a way that shoots it out directly back. Now, wiring this up while having it be assembled loosely is a good way to go. That way you can turn the turn signal on and then use your hand just like before, kind of see where that light comes out and then tighten it down the rest of the way. Where you mount this is up to you. We're building a custom motorcycle. There's usually going to be a hole somewhere, and if there isn't, you could usually create one. This is not where the turn signals went. This is just a random hole, but I'm going to use it at least for this mock-up today. Now that we have it drilled, we'll just run our wire through. And just like on the handlebars, sand this, make it nice and smooth so that you aren't hurting any wires. And then we will drop the nut right over that and screw it in on the other side. So now, as before, under this outer sleeving is 2 wires that are still insulated, which are going to be 1 red, 1 black, 1 ground, 1 positive, right? We're going to ground the negative, the black wire, wherever we want, whether we want to put it right here near the turn signal or we want to run it all the way back to the mo unit. We want to splice it into a different ground wire. That's totally fine. Speaking of splicing, we have the positive wire that needs to get connected to the mo unit in the turn right side of the mo unit. We already have a wire in there, right? Because we have the turn signal up front, the mo.blaze disc. As I warned earlier about wiring up the turn signals up at the handlebars and how you'll account for needing to wire these in as well, we have a few different options. We can take the positive wire and run this all the way up to that wire ferrule, connect them together, and just run them straight from the wire ferrule out to each other. We can splice this in like a T-joint into the positive wire from that turn signal. We can run it like a Y-splitter. We can do a lot of different things. All that really matters is that we run as little wire as possible. You don't want a mile of wiring because then you'll need to make it much thicker. We run as little wire as possible, staying efficient, and that we have good connections everywhere. Otherwise, just make sure that you've accounted for having multiple power draws on that wire when you chose your wire thickness. If you chose, let's say, a wire for your headlight and it just barely is thick enough, but then you need to connect a running light from the mo.rear to the same wire, well, then you probably should have picked a thicker wire. So just keep that in mind. Otherwise, you can split this in however you'd like. Okay, the mo unit's on. Right turn signal. There we go. We have the rear one working as well. And if you can see it, we got the one working up front. The mo.blaze disc is on as well, as they're spliced together. Now I can again kind of use my hand and see where the light is at. I can see it's a little too high here, so I can adjust that down. There we go. I'm happy with that right there. And now I can take my wrench and I can actually tighten it down to, I believe, 4 Newton meters max. The mo.blaze 10s will feel like a very similar installation. Make sure to sand this nice and smooth so it doesn't scratch up the wires while you're feeding it through. Feed it through. This one's a little bit more obvious of which is the right direction, as it has really a, a strong lens. So we'll just have that lined up there and run the nut over it. This is so small. This is crazy. If you're really wanting, I mean, I think the mo.blaze pin on the other side is already really stealthy. Those are probably my favorite turn signals from Motogadget. It's what I have on the CV750. But man, if you want something really stealthy, these are great. And keep in mind, you can still just use these as turn signals. You don't need to use them as a brake light if you don't want. You want a huge brake light on the back, that's totally fine. You just want to upgrade your turn signals or run these for turn signals. You just don't hook up the other wires. Okay, that's kind of hand tight there. Wow, that's crazy. I like that though, that's cool. And of course this has 4 wires coming out of it. You need the ground, then you need a turn signal, a running light, and a brake light. So there is a black, a red, a brown, and a green. And the mo unit manual right here will tell you which each one does. So let's add some wire ferrules onto the end of these or tap them in. For the running light, we're gonna probably tap into the headlight to be running when we have the headlight on, we have the running light on. The turn signal, we'll be tapping into the left turn signal wire that's already ran. And then the brake light, this one will be getting, I think it's the red one, we'll be getting the brake light switch at the mo unit. That is going to be running a wire ferrule straight from here. And then when we run the mo.rear, that will also be running into that same spot. I probably wouldn't be running the 10s and the mo.rear at the same time, but I'll probably splice them together anyways, just so they can easily pop into the mo unit, and then I can press the brake and see them both work at the same time. Okay, we've got it wired up. We've wired up the mo.blaze 10s and the mo.rear at the same time, just because they have many of these similar wires, so just did it all at once. Regarding the mo.rear, it has this plate on the back that is attached to the license plate bracket. You can get the North America or the Europe style, and it is just a flat bracket. It is bendable, drillable. You can really do what you need to for your motorcycle, for your custom setup. I'm just zip tying it on here because we're taking it off soon anyways to rebuild the bike, but it is on here. So if we turn the bike on, turn the headlight on, we should have running lights. Yep. We should have a left turn signal here and there, and we should have a brake light. Yeah, look at that. That is awesome. I can see the reflection here. This is just a big reflector here in the middle, by the way. That's just to add a little bit of extra safety. I think you need it for certain places, so good for regulation for having that. And otherwise, you have the 2 lights here that are very similar to just the mo.blaze 10s, but built into a whole system that has a light for your license plate, the reflector, left and right, all in one package. This is pretty cool. I'm probably gonna be using this on the final build. All right, look at us. We have all these different lights installed. We've got the mo.blaze pin, the mo.blaze 10s, the mo.rear, the mo.blaze discs. We're covered in lights at this point, and I think it all looks fantastic. I'm honestly not sure what I'm going to pick for the final setup, but I'm really a big fan of this mo.rear. Now, in case this is the last video you watch before you install your blinkers and your lights and all that stuff, instead of clicking onto the next one, which you should once it comes out, keep in mind that for your dummy lights, you're going to need to tap into your turn signals again. So whether it's dummy lights or dummy lights for your gauge, like what we're going to be installing in the next episode, keep that in mind with how you wire these up, that you'll need to splice not only the front and back turn signals, but you'll also need to splice it into a dummy light. Same goes for the high beam, the headlight. You're gonna have an oil pressure light, but that's unrelated. And so that's just something to keep in mind with how you wire it. If I haven't shown you the current state of the wiring diagram, here it is here. Go ahead and take a look at this, but don't see this as the only way to install it. Frankly, when I go to reinstall everything, the wiring diagram probably will not look like it does in this picture. As mentioned, in the next video, we're going to be covering 2 of the most popular gauges from Motogadget. That's going to be the mo.scope Pro and the Chrono Classic 2. Hopefully by installing both of those with 2 pretty different styles, that'll help you install any of the Motogadget gauges that you'll be using. Until I see you next, I'm probably just gonna be cleaning up the wire so it's a little bit easier to look at. And don't forget that if you want to follow along in writing, the Motogadget manuals are online. You can just search the Motogadget part with the word manual at the end, and I'm sure you'll find the PDF. If you're ready to purchase Motogadget products, you can purchase Motogadget products at motogadget.com or motogadget.us. As always, you can find us on YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram for fast faster, more frequent vertical content. Thanks for watching.